What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Launch Podcast. On today's episode, you will be hearing from ultra trail runner and founder of Trail Sisters, Gina Lucrezi. I was fortunate enough to meet Gina through the ultra running world, and today she's going to take us through her experience as a female ultra runner and into her creation of Trail Sisters and all the amazing stuff she's done in the world of running through them.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gina, for spending time with us. We loved hearing your story, hearing Trail Sisters' story. We hope it inspires everyone who listens to this podcast, just like it's inspired us. You can find Gina on Instagram at Gina, Gina, Lucrezi, Lucrezi. You can also find Trail Sisters at trailsisters.net and on Instagram at trail_sisters.
As always, today's music was brought to you by The Palms. You can check out their new mixtape on Spotify, and you can find them on social media at The Palms Music. Thank you, Johnny and Ben, for letting us use those tunes. Enjoy this episode, everyone. We'll see you at the top.
Later.
Bam. Hey, there you are. What's up? That's my
What's up? How you doing, Gina?
Hey, not much. How are you?
I'm great. We're so excited to talk to you.
Here,
Cool. Well, I'm stoked.
Yeah, we're gonna have some fun. We gotta figure out how to get the phone standing up.
We're still just a bunch of goons.
Yeah, we have no idea what we're doing here, but
Oh, it's okay. It's funny. I was hoping to, eventually want to do a Trail Sisters podcast.
Yeah, you definitely.
At some point, but no time right now to even put it together. So I'm trying to learn by, watching what other people do and, going through the process. So
That's it, really.
It's
funny because a lot of like you're saying you're trying to podcast, we're we're trying to blog more. And, I was just looking at Trail Sisters and you guys crush the blog end of things.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's going really well. I've just lucked out with kind of, finding something that there wasn't a lot of content for. And it's just ever since then, just kind of went. The women are, trail running itself is a great sport, obviously, right? And it's been really male dominated, and that's totally fine. That's great. Dudes should totally run, and, I'm glad to see them out there. Yeah. But women are stoked to try it too, and they just are struggling to find content or how to, they want to learn about it, and there's just really a lack of it. And when I started the site, I kind of didn't even know what it was going to be. And then all of a sudden kind of took off. So yeah, I just kind of stumbled across, finding a really, really good thing, I guess.
Totally. It really is. It's amazing. And I know I've texted you and messaged you many times before, how many times I've seen the hats, and they're everywhere. Everywhere in LA, I see them now when I'm running. It's crazy.
Oh, cool. That's good.
In such a short time frame, though, because I didn't realize that you were only it started a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, April of 2016.
Crazy.
When did it really start taking off? It sounds like you just were doing it because you loved it, and then all of a sudden kind of grew, huh?
Yeah, I'd say last summer. Well, no, maybe earlier this summer is when it kind of really took off.
Wow.
It had pretty solid traffic through last year into this year, but midsummer I think is when it kind of really took off. And we started doing the road trip. And as we were visiting people along the way, I think that really helped. It just grew more awareness because we were there in person, and we'd promote, the places we'd be going. So I think that's really where it kind of did its thing. So our traffic's doubled. It's doubled in the past 6 months, which is kind of cool because it's still a fairly young, website starting in April of 2016. So
yeah, cool. Well, obviously we're going to talk a lot about Trail Sisters, but and first off, I got to say, meeting you a year and a half ago, I don't know if you remember this, that was right before I ran my first ultra.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So meeting you and Christy at that time was perfect. All the extra inspiration and motivation and good vibes that I needed. So thank you for that. That was...
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it this way.
I know. I did the same. We don't know how to do this either.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there you go.
Oh, wait,
now
here.
she's sideways.
Yeah.
Well, all right, whatever.
We don't care.
Yeah, we're good. You probably don't want to look at our ugly faces anyways.
No, you guys are great.
That's funny. All right, well, right on. Well, your resume, Gina, is freaking nuts.
It's dense.
I didn't even, like...
Oh, thanks.
I'm bowing to you from over here.
Oh, God.
But seriously, so I would love if we could, before we talked about Trail Sisters, just so that everyone knows who you are, which is an awesome person with a dense resume of, awesome accomplishments in the trail running world, but obviously leading up to Trail Sisters. So maybe you could tell everyone how you got into ultra running, who you are a little bit. I mean, I can start you off because maybe you won't be as... you might be a little bit more humble about it, but Gina is, I was reading on the site, and this is all amazing stuff, 10-time All-American in college, 11 school records. Come on, Gina. 4-time Athlete of the Year at your school. So that's freshman through senior year, or is that?
Yes.
Yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
And then not giving out.
Yeah.
Yeah. No extra years in there.
Yeah. Well, I did an extra semester, so,
Oh, fair enough.
But then, like, when you move past college, a lot
Hold on, national champion as well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Very nice.
1,500 indoor.
Hell yeah.
Jesus. And yeah, so I mean, we could probably go on with college forever, but I mean, after it, I noticed like it started with shorter races, it looks like, where you were winning a lot of them or like being really competitive. And then maybe a year or two bouncing up more into the ultra distances with some pretty big races pretty fast. I saw the FKT of that 4-pass loop in Aspen. I mean, anyone deep in the world knows how hard that is. And obviously, I would love to talk about your Mount Whitney FKT. But yeah, I guess that's a good starting point. Now people have a little bit more of an idea of just who you are and all of your accomplishments. But if you want to take any of those away or just tell how you got into running or your experience, it's all you. So
yeah. To be honest, I was a field hockey player first and foremost, like in school, and I love that. And I just happened we had to run the mile as like training and whatnot, and I did it one day and I did really, really well at it, and then I was like, maybe there's something to this running thing, and then I went out for track and I broke this is in high school, I broke our school record as a freshman, and then my parents were like, you got to kind of keep doing this. I didn't really want to because I was like, it's not fun, I'd like the team aspect, the field hockey and everything, but yeah, I got more into it, and my parents at one point even told me, if I would run around my parents live in a development, and it's about a mile long, and they're like, well, if you run around the development, we'll give you like $5 if you go run around. I was like, I don't want to do it. I just wasn't into it. So I went out that day, and I came back after 2 miles and told them they owed me 10. So it was kind of funny, and I really love the short distance stuff. Then after a while, I think like anybody, once you start having success with something, that in itself is kind of attractive. And so next thing you know, it's like, okay, I'll just keep doing this, see what happens. And then college, I went to a D3 school, and there's obviously no athletic scholarships available, and I had pretty good grades and whatnot, and so I was able to get in there and just kind of did that for the 4 years and continued to do well with running. I don't know. It was kind of, we had a really good team, but we never won any huge, team league champs or anything like that. And so running in itself is a pretty solo sport. So I just kind of gotten used to like, all right, just keep going, do your thing. And the success was fun, but I always wanted to have like a team win somewhere, It's just, I don't know. I enjoy the social aspect of it. And then I graduated college, and I decided, I wanted to keep running. I wanted to see where my talents could possibly go. Being at a D3 school, D3 schools are great. They're excellent. But I always wondered what would it be like if I was at a D1, university with all the equipment and the opportunities and the facilities themselves. You have access to so much more. So I always wondered what that would be like. And because of that, I decided to continue running after school. And I did more short races in the beginning. When I was up in New England, I had a great, few years up there, and then I moved out west, and that's when I started doing ultras. And I decided to change to ultras because I was so sick of going anaerobic within the first 2 minutes of your race.
Right.
Which is it's fun, but I'm like, what would it feel like if I got to start a race really easy and then I could just jog for a really long time? That has to be better, right?
Yeah, well, that's one thing I love doing is walking the first 2-3 miles or just starting. I'm like, okay, it is a race, but it really doesn't feel like one, it just
right.
much more relaxing.
Well, that was the interest. I had a friend, Howard Nippert, who was I met him in Colorado Springs. That's where I went for a grad degree internship, and I was working at the United States Olympic Committee in Colorado Springs, and he was out there, and we were both rooming from the same person, Nancy Hobbs, who actually happened to be she's in charge of it's the ATRA, the American Trail Running Association. And so she was like, you got to try this trail stuff. So I tried it, and him being there, as he's a super duper ultra runner. He is I think back in the day, he was really into the 50 mile and the 100 mile stuff, 100K. And I was really curious about what he was doing. And so then I started trying to do the long stuff. And it's, it's interesting. It's a whole different type, event as compared to running a half marathon or 10K. But
how is it different? How is it different for you from a mindset standpoint when you're running it to how you're feeling when you run it? Because I think a lot of people, myself included, are so used to hearing about the half marathon, the full marathon, and then we hear oh my goodness, people are running 3 marathons in one race. Yeah. How is that different for you and for people that are listening?
Yeah, so how it's mainly different, it's just, your pacing and just your overall mindset with that. It's okay, you got to hold yourself back. You got to tell yourself hey, you got to keep your pace conservative, because it'll just blow up, and then you'll be forced to walk the rest of the race, which in ultra, depending on how long it is, for sure, you end up walking some anyway. But and then also fueling yourself. I think that's one of the biggest differences. In the longer distance stuff, you have to start thinking about putting in the calories, because you're burning so much, and you're out there for so long that you need to refuel yourself. And when you're running a 10K or whatever, even a half marathon, I think, you get away with not really taking in much. Some people will still take a gel or something. It really depends on how long you're out there and how your body reacts to it. But I think the fueling situation is one of the biggest differences. And then just understanding pacing and time on feet. So those are the two big things.
Yeah, I feel like going further, the longer you go, the more mindful you have to be. And, you've heard it a zillion times, but it's it's more of an eating and drinking contest than anything.
Right.
Figuring, just what Gina's saying, figuring out how to fuel properly. So,
yeah. Somebody once said to me, just think of it as a car, you're driving your car across the country, right? It won't go unless you put gas in it. When you run out of gas, the car stops. Same thing with the body, you have to keep putting food in, and if you don't, you blow up and you're kind of sitting on the side of the trail and you're done. Mm-hmm. So same concept, but it's really simple, and you think a lot of people would understand that naturally, but when you're out there, you sometimes think you're superhuman, and people cut corners, and everybody learns the hard way at some point, every famous,
me
too. Every elite professional runner has goofed on something along the way. It's how we learn, and it's a good thing, actually. You learn much better when you actually make mistakes. So yeah, the nutrition thing is something just to always be aware of.
We were actually talking about this before we hopped on the FaceTime here. I was asking Zach how many calories he burns on one of his long runs and how he fuels. And I was curious how you fuel on a long run. What are you eating? And how are you doing that?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't know quite. I try to go by a certain standard. So I try to do around 150 to 200 sometimes, depending on how long I'll be out there and the intensity. So it depends. And I used to kind of if I was doing some version of like goujamps or something like that, or, gels or something, and all the calories on the back. So you can kind of just aim from there. I used to do a lot of that, but then I kind of drifted more into real food. And so you just kind of gauge. I'll do some versions of like trail mix, or I'll do like a Nature Valley bar, stuff like that. And then other times I'll mix up like, goo gels and things like that. It just depends, but I always just read the back of the packages and kind of break it apart into, how many ounces is this? How much would this be? And then just throw it in little baggies and take it with me. But I always aim to try to get the real food in first, and then use the, like the goos or the chomps or whatever later on in the race, or in the run, more so because your stomach starts to shut down the longer you're out there. And the longer you're out there, it's easier to digest liquids. So things like, goo energy, stuff like that, you can usually just dissolve it a lot easier towards the end versus like if you're doing it the whole time. At least that's kind of how it works for me. So I get my solids in first and then work more towards liquids on the back half.
I think the nutrition and the eating in ultra right now, it seems like something that everyone is still trying to figure out. And I don't know if there is a way to actually figure it out, because the body is just like so taxed. I mean, like what specific things you need, or you can feel them, but it'll be interesting to see where that sort of industry takes off. But I mean, it's because sometimes it's like, oh man, I really want like a sandwich right now. But other times, and it's like other times it's like, oh, I'm just going to have a gel. I feel you on that. It's going to be an interesting road, the nutrition of ultra.
Yeah, I mean, it really is an individual thing. I mean, I'll go, when I was on the Trail Sisters tour and stuff, like people ask questions at each stop, and nutrition's brought up all the time because, everybody's trying to figure out, well, how do I nail this down? What is the right thing to do? And I always kind of start off by saying there's no right or wrong. It's just really what works for you. So, yeah. And I always, I put the disclaimer out there. I'm like, what works for me is, most likely not going to work for you, but I'm happy to tell you what I do. Use it as somewhat of a guideline, but feel free to like scribble outside the lines with it. Because, one of the best things that's worked for me when I've done hundreds, not that I've done a ton of them, but being out there is like taking a lot of races will have like, a soup or a broth, and they have like, usually they'll have like mashed potatoes along with just solid potatoes. If you can mix your mashed potatoes into the broth, it makes it a little thicker. So then you're kind of, because like chewing physical act of chewing isn't that hard to do, but the gag reflex comes in. So if you can drink the calories, it's easier than like kind of trying to swallow hard particles. I don't know. For me,
I love how easily you're making it sound like you enjoy that, and everyone listening is probably like, "What the hell? Like mashed potatoes and broth? Like what?" But that is the way it goes, right?
I mean,
just think of like a creamy soup,
Yeah, I mean,
cream of potato. I don't know.
That's great. Well, that's one thing I really love about the running community, the thru hiking, just the adventure community is just like the whatever, man. Like there's no hoity-toityness to it.
No.
We're drinking mashed potatoes out of water bottles.
Yeah.
I like it.
Well, you're so raw out there. You get to a point where you're totally stripped of everything in the sense, like you just start trying to do whatever you can do to survive and get through it. So yeah, I don't know. It's fun to be creative too, like that. Yeah. Figuring out what works, what doesn't.
Totally. That's awesome. All right, well, let's talk about if we have enough time, so let's chat about a couple of these races or FKTs. Let's see here. The list is really long.
How we started the Mount Whitney one?
Should we just start from the top?
I want to, I think that'd be cool.
We'll descend? Okay. So, Mount Whitney FKT, ascent, full FKT, like round trip, is that?
Yeah, I mean, when I was, go to the FKT pro boards that Buzz Burrell and Peter Bachman have, there's sometimes they break it up into like, what was your ascent time? You could even say your descent time or in the total round trip. So I just my ascent time was pretty quick, and as I'm not sitting in front of my computer, and there's 1,000 numbers in my head right now that I'm like, I forget exactly what it is.
Yeah, no worries. We can find them.
3.5 or something. But
3.5%.
What's that?
3.5, you said?
Yeah, I think it's somewhere around there.
Yeah, I might have even wrote it down. I pulled it up earlier because I was like, "Holy shit!"
Because we tried ascending all the way to the top of Mount Whitney earlier, and it took us a lot longer than 3.5, and we didn't even get close.
Let me call it just a quick time out here, and that everyone listening, Mount Whitney is the highest peak in the lower 48. It's in the Sierra Nevada, a beautiful mountain. Rugged trail getting up there, though, steep, no matter how you cut it. And that is the mountain we're talking about. And that is the mountain that Gina FKT'd, meaning fastest known time up and down. Female FKT, right?
What's that?
Female FKT?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, insanely badass. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
so
that's awesome.
Now we can take it away.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I decided to, I would go on the pro boards a lot, and I guess what triggered me to go after it was the fact that I just didn't see a ton of women's times on anything. Like it was really cool to see, hey, like all these different routes or mountains and, just different destinations or loops that people had attempted. And looking through the lists, there was a ton of guys that conquered this stuff. And it was, it's super impressive and motivating to me to see that. But, I just, as I was reading through, I'm like, well, what woman has, a set time, or why aren't there any women, overall times? And I kind of was like, well, shoot, I could go do this. Maybe I won't have, the overall time, but maybe I can inspire some women to go give this a shot. It's really,
nice.
It's a fun thing to do. It's a nice challenge, and you get some wonderful views. So I've always been intrigued with the Sierra Nevada range, and I had never been to the top of Mount Whitney before, and living in Colorado, I'd been on Elbert and, many others. And so I was like, well, I want to tackle the highest peak in, was the contagious, whatever. The contagious?
Yeah, contiguous.
Contiguous,
that's the
one. United States, I would love to go to Denali one day, but we'll see. But anyhow, I got really lucky with a permit. I was on a road trip, and I was like, well, I didn't know how hard it was to get permits. And I started looking. It's like, oh my gosh, every single day is gone. And this was probably about 2 months out. It's kind of silly. Anybody that looks at those permits would be thinking, wow, this girl's a complete moron that she didn't plan better. But I really had no idea, because I'd never really done a route before that needed a permit. So anyhow, I was looking, and sure enough, randomly, there was a Thursday that had one spot open, and it happened to be while I was out in this area. So it's like, oh wow, okay. So I took it, went out there, and kind of just, I think I started many people told me to start earlier, and I believe I started 5 or 6. They're like, you should start earlier because it's going to get hot. And I was like, well, I'll probably be up and down a lot faster than most of these people telling me,
Being humble, don't want to tell people, nah, dude, I'm not going to smoke that.
I was like, I didn't want to sound like a butthead, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm not going to be out here forever, I'm going to get back down. But who knows, if you have an accident or something, then you are stuck out there for a while. So, but that's the same idea as driving down the street and you could get hit by a car. There's 1,000 things that can always happen. But yeah, so I took off. I actually had, the best part of the whole thing was going up. I felt really strong on the ascent. I got, I kind of hiked the first section, I guess, and it kind of mellows out for a little bit, and so you can, move pretty quick. Then, never being on the trail before, at least that high, a long time ago, I was on the trail a mile up, and then that was it. So I've never really seen this route before, but it gets kind of confusing because you're in a lot of rock, and I mean, you can follow it, but
right at about 12,000 feet, you're basically in a rock garden. I forget what they call that camp, but that's where we stayed last time. But it's nice and mellow through that middle section, after Lone Pine Lake, and then it gets technical. Is not really the word, but just route finding, you're saying, it just takes up time. So
right. Well, that was the thing. I knew when I was in there, and I'd read enough reports. I was like, all right, so it gets a little confusing. So it's like, well, crap. I hope I don't lose a lot of time. But it's hard to go fast when you're, kind of worrying about that versus just worrying about moving forward. And
well, right, because if you go the wrong way at a fast pace, then you have to make up all that. Then it's kind of over. So you're kind of dilly-dallying to make sure you're going the right way. At least that's what happens to me. Yeah.
And that was your first time on Mount Whitney.
Yes.
So first time on Mount Whitney, you have the fastest known time as a female. I think that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
All right, so you get to that section and you're kind of having trouble following the route. And then after that section, you get a huge view, so.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So I kind of figured it out. I didn't really make any wrong turns that took me, off for a long time. It was a quick, like, oh, this doesn't look right, turn around, go back. And then you get, what is it? I think it's like the 99 switchbacks or something like that. That one section that goes back and forth forever. And that was probably the worst section, because you're just like, you just want to get to the top. And by that point, I finally started, I was catching a bunch of people that started or who had camped out. So, it's not, super wide. It's fairly narrow. So, but here I'm like, moving pretty quick. I jogged quite a bit of it, and then would hike the steeper sections. And so people kind of saw me coming, and they would move, and they're like, they'd say like, well, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm going for the, an FKT for what, and they had no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
I just smiled and said thank you and kind of kept moving. Then I thought later on, like, wow, I wonder if I didn't talk as much,
That's so funny. I know you're like, oh my God, I'm giving trail runners a bad name. Like, totally.
But it was really encouraging. They were like, oh, good job. They were excited watching me come through. They didn't know who I was or anything, and that's fine. But just to see somebody putting in this hard effort, randomly with this little pack, everybody else had a large pack. So finally get to the top. Turned around, took a glimpse when you kind of crest that little ridge there. That was beautiful. And I would have loved to stay there longer and as I keep going. And then you kind of go down, I think on the backside, it's been a little while, but you go down on the backside, you kind of go up and down, climb a little bit. Because I know you take a little dip and then you have to come back up. And then you're kind of on some boulders and whatnot. The trail's all right, but it's a little bit more scrambly, nothing dangerous, but it's just not
nothing
easy to
too
run.
dangerous. But I think we as trail people downplay it. I mean, you can still mess yourself up on Whitney, and when you're running, like, a few of those turns on like the backside, so the east side of it, when you're coming up towards the peak, you're doing these little cutouts where it's probably if you slip, you might just slide for a while, but you can definitely mess yourself up. So running, it has an extra little element to it for sure. So, what I'm saying is that's something else to manage as you're going for this record that you have to think about. So it's impressive how you can keep the mind in focus,
Right. No, totally. I remember, eventually got to the top. So like I said, I had never seen this area before. I just knew I'd just keep going. Eventually I'm going to run into like this building,
there's a hut on top.
That's kind of, it's like, well, when I see that, I know I'll be there. So I just kept going and kind of swing around, and it kind of has that really like kind of gradual grade, and it's all kind of flat, slabby. And then there it is. And sure enough, right into that, signed my name. Took a few photos at the summit. It was a little hazy, so it wasn't super clear, which was kind of a bummer. I asked somebody to take a photo of me, and he's like, well, do you want some more? I'm like, no, I'm good.
Yeah, see them later.
No, right here is fine. Just snap the photo.
So it was just funny trying to do all this first timer stuff on the highest peak I've ever been on, while trying to run it as fast as I could. So, it was great, but, I probably could have nicked off a bunch more time if I wasn't,
Yeah.
But that's the thing. It is what it is. It is what you want it to be. And so I started descending, and I felt pretty good until I got back to the, the section where you go down the switchbacks. And that's when I started to feel pretty sick. And I started thinking like, well, how much did I eat? Have I been eating and drinking on the way up? And I didn't. I eat like one packet of like Cliff Chomps essentially, and had some water, and it was because I was so focused I wasn't thinking about it. But it's 11 miles up. I think it's a round trip of like 21, 22 miles or so,
right
right in there. Everybody's GPS will tell you something a little different, but I didn't eat a ton, and So I started feeling pretty sick on the way down, to the extent of like, there was a few spots where I end up just kind of, shuffling along, and I'm like, oh, like I should be hammering this whole thing, and just couldn't, between some dry heaves and whatnot, you're just kind of, I filled up some more water at different spots when I could, and just tried to settle my stomach a bit. But so my decent time wasn't something I was super psyched on, but overall I knew I was going to be able to come under the time that I found on Strava, because there was nothing on the pro boards for a female on the standard route. There's some stuff for Tina Lewis, I know, has the Mountaineers route time, which is great. So I went the super long route that's just all hiking, running, but yeah, so I think it's a record that I'd like to go back and crack over again. It's totally possible. It's a good first record to have up there, to hopefully inspire more women to think about it or to aim for it. It's totally breakable, so hopefully somebody will chase after it. If not, I want to come back and drop the time if I can. So
I love that this whole thing is like just to, I mean, obviously there's a lot of reasons, but it's so based on inspiring other people. Like even from the start of that story, I knew you were going to be like, yeah, I went and ran this mountain to motivate more women to go run. And it's like, you're putting your heart, sweat, and soul and tears and barfing and hitting the bonk zone and running up a mountain and like risking all this shit just to motivate and inspire. So that's really rad.
Yeah, and have you always been like that? I mean, when you're running in college, were you just running to run and what you got out of it? And then when you left college, it sounded like you wanted, I guess, more of maybe a higher purpose for your running. Is that right?
Yeah, in college, I'd say it was more about, just getting the results for, I wanted to win, and I had fun doing it because of winning, and I wanted to make my school proud. I wanted, my teammates proud, my parents proud, so it was a lot of that. And then kind of as I've gotten older and, I think like anybody, you understand more, you see things from different perspectives. And I don't know, I realized that I think a lot of women feel like with the outdoors, they don't really have that place. Or some women like are badass and they go after it and they understand like, hey, I own this place just as much as anybody else does. But I think a lot of women are fearful of it, and it breaks my heart, because I think everybody should feel like they belong there. And I don't know where that comes from for me. It just seems to be there. So
and that's awesome. Yeah. And that, I think, that kind of transitions right into...
That is a perfect transition, because everything, I mean, you're clearly adding tons of value just from what you're doing, like as a human in running and inspiring people that way on your own end. But on an even bigger scale through Trail Sisters, which, is something we obviously want to talk about.
Yeah, I know we were talking a little bit about it at the beginning, but
I think it's amazing that in basically a year and a half's time, how much of a following you've had in an industry that's really quite small anyways, trail running. And, as I said, I'm starting to see hats everywhere I go on trail. Yeah. I mean, everywhere. From when I was on the AZT and seeing someone in Arizona to being out here in LA in the Santa Monicas, anywhere I go. Even when I was on the JMT for a second this summer, I saw one. And so it's amazing how much of a spread. Yeah, it's super cool. And how much of a spread you've had so quickly. But I think it's because you've hit an awesome thread. And anyway, Trail Sisters, amazing thing. How did that get going?
Yeah, I had a little background, I guess, because so I was a runner. I was doing my thing in that way, and then I worked in the industry. I used to work for Innovate a long time ago as a marketing manager. I worked for Trail Runner magazine selling ads. I used to work with Brian Powell at I Run Far, doing some business management and whatnot. And then I also then transitioned to doing more contract work and being an athlete manager and doing some social for like Julbo, Ultimate Direction, and Vask. So, I've kind of played in all the, marketing arenas, if you will, and seeing all these different sides of things, it was quite interesting and just learning like different strategies and objectives. And I kind of eventually learned, like, what are we doing to really like boost the female demographic in this sport, and I just knew there was a lot of women who were interested. I mean, if you look at road running statistics, there's more women, I think, running road half marathons than there are men, and like, awesome, great, and I just think to myself, in general in the road sport, how many of those women would probably love to try trail running, but just might not know how, and when I say not know how, I know I'm sure they understand how to run, but it is a different beast. It is something like, if you go run on a trail the same pace you run on the road, you're going to struggle with it. Like, you got to slow your speed, shorten your stride. You have to strengthen muscles so that it's not just like a linear motion anymore. You're kind of bouncing around. So it's a little different. And I think a lot of people get intimidated by that. I think guys naturally are like, oh, that's awesome, I want to go. Like, guys are kind of brought up like, hey, go outside and play, and I think traditionally a lot more women have been told, like, hey, let's like stay inside and play with dolls, and that's not for everybody. I'm sure some little girls were taught to go outside and, go play with little boys and whatnot. And that's great. But, I think it's just like this big barrier of entry where there's not enough content, or just kind of, I don't know, just welcoming information, telling them like, hey, this is a place for you. And so that's where it's like, well, I can do that. I know how to build a website essentially, or, get some content from friends. And so I asked 5 or 6 women that I was good friends with if they'd want to write some stories. I was going to put on this website directed towards women in trail running, and hopefully we could continue to like write stories and get people psyched. So that's kind of how it started. Just something tiny, just a little blog that would be, hopefully inspirational to other women. So that was the beginning.
Yeah, I think it totally has been. I just took this from your site, and it says, Trail Sisters, building a community of women, inspiring others to lead healthy lifestyles while adventuring outdoors and protecting Earth's playgrounds. So that's what it is for the listeners.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's an awesome thing. So you've been able to basically source it through a community. You essentially had this idea, reached out to a few people, started putting it out there, but now the community is like, it's really growing, right? I mean, it's community fed pretty much, so it is like this one big family pretty much, right?
Right. So it went from like little blog to, now it's more of an online journal is kind of what I think about it, or think of it as. And, it's there to inspire, educate, and empower women interested in trail running. And so we started out with like 4 or 5 women that were contributing articles, and now it's more or less, if anybody has something that they kind of want to talk about, obviously it relates to trail running, wants to share with the community, they can email me. It's info@trailsisters.net, and I'll work with them to kind of put an article together and get it posted on the site. The community is not made up of, just fast women or just backpackers or just mid-packers or, like, we're all different. We've all gone through different, a variety of things in life. And so a story I have might only resonate with a handful of women, and a story somebody else, has might resonate with a whole different group of women. So I think having a variety of voices on the site is a really good thing, because you'll be able to speak to, a whole different group of women. I think when you just kind of streamline things, you only reach a certain, demographic or grouping, and it shouldn't be that way. So the site is really geared towards everyone and anybody. So at least that's where I want it to continue to go. So I'm always, you don't have to be a professional writer or journalist. You do have to know how to put a sentence together, but like, I mean,
that would help.
If not, you can probably help.
Yeah, you can edit it out.
I'm like, I don't have a journalism background, so I've been learning how to edit things as I go along, and by far, I am definitely not perfect. The whole idea is just being able to, get these, the topic of what they want to talk about, get the moral of the story to come through. I want women reading these stories, and really anybody, if it's not that, men are very welcome to come on the site as well. The whole idea was just having content that was written by women on the site. But the stories, some of them are very like female specific, but a lot of them, anybody could take away, the moral of the story, and it could be related to, anything they do. But, but yeah, it's been fun so far, and I think more and more women see that, oh wow, I have something I want to share, and I can just email her, and she'll pretty much let me put it on the site.
Yeah,
so.
I think that's so cool, is that you're sourcing all this information from, women around the country, women around the world on trail running. Like, I know we popped on there and we were seeing where you can run in Portland, Oregon. I have no idea, but I think people being in Portland, hop on the site, see where they can run, maybe grab a couple other trail sisters and go on a run themselves, right?
Yeah, that we have like general type articles, and we do the Where to Run series, and that's been really cool because I personally have traveled quite a few places, and I am trying to write some Where to Runs currently, but I always love hearing about like other places, what else is out there, and it seems to be really helpful for the women that actually live in those communities, and then as well as if you're passing through. We have a good amount so far, but I hope that section continues to grow. And obviously, it's really helpful for anybody that wants to share about their town, their city, and a lot of people are proud of where they are. I'd love to learn more about those areas have to offer. But we do those. We've started doing more reviews. We were doing a little bit of an interview series. And then another big section that we do is called Ask the Trail Sisters, which is if you have any question, it can be anonymous, so you don't have to say your name or anything. But whatever your questions are, I'll take them, and then once I have about 5 or 6 of them, I send them out to a ton of contributors that have sent in articles from the past, and get their their thoughts on what would they do for these questions, and then they compile it all and put it as a post on the site, just to provide some insight from a bunch of different people. So, yeah.
So thank you for that. I think like one of the biggest questions, and I've had it a lot just in my line of work and just socializing with, women interested in running, is the obvious one is like the safety aspect of hitting the trail and running in the woods. And I'm sure you've had a lot of conversations about that subject or on that subject with other female runners. Is there one thing you have to say to female runners, in regards to that topic? I mean, if there's 10 things, great. But I think that typically, at least in my world, has been what seems like the biggest thing holding more women from hitting the trail, essentially. Is the question I get is, am I safe out there? And I think that's usually the biggest thing, is fear holding people back from doing something new, especially when it has to do with running in the woods.
Alone.
Alone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's one of the big things that, especially on this road tour I did not too long ago, that was one of the big topics we kind of covered. So a lot of women are kind of fearful of that. It's always, just it's in the back of the mind at all times. And give them some advice on like what to do, and maybe some people are like, well, should I carry this? Should I carry that? I'm like, hey, do whatever you need to do to make yourself feel, safe, and that you have confidence when you're out there. Because you never want to, and this goes for anything in life, but like, don't let anything hold you back from pursuing, your goals and your dreams. And so don't let your fear of a potential creeper on the trail hold you back from going and experiencing trail running. And when you have a bunch of women there discussing, like, what do you do? How do you get around it? All the answers usually, by the time we're done with the show or whatever the conversation, the women usually feel pretty empowered to get back out there. But, just being aware of your surroundings. So like, if you're listening to music, take out one earbud, or don't wear either of them. You want to be able to hear your surroundings. That's simple and really helpful. Telling somebody where you're going. A way to really always feel safe is, call a friend, go run with somebody else so that there's more than one of you. People that have dogs, it's a great time for your dog to get exercise. Take your pet with you.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Some people like to carry mace, and there's nothing wrong with that. Go for that. If that makes you feel better, like, keep that in your hand. Trying to think of any other things off the top of my head. I always think if you're really nervous about it too, like, there's a lot of free self-defense courses that you can take. Go to your local, city officials or the local police station. Ask them if there's any courses, or, I've asked a lot of the retailers that I was visiting if they could put on, one night a week or something, or once per month, maybe invite, a local, I don't know, police member in to show, women, like ladies night, how to do 3 self-defense moves, just something that will give them more sense of like, hey, if something happens, I can do X, Y, and Z to get myself out of the situation.
Right. Well, it's funny because that sounds like something that's useful off the trail anyways. It's like confidence building anyways,
Right.
Yeah. And it also, I thought was interesting is like pretty much everything you just listed is really nothing different than you should probably be doing if you're going for a run around Hollywood or if you're going for a run around New York City. Like it's all the same. Like the likelihood is pretty much the same. I mean, the difference in animals are garbage rats versus maybe a snake, but like otherwise it's all the same.
Just being mindful of your surroundings. And I know, when, I go running or when we're out on trail that's the big thing is being extremely present and mindful of what you're doing and where you're stepping, because you can roll an ankle like, nobody's business just by thinking about or listening to music too loud.
Right. Yeah. No, that's totally true. GPS too is another really great thing to have. And there's like apps on your phone that are simple, like, you can like let people find your location and things like that, or you can go, get the Delorme or things like that, spot device. You can go like, totally high level with that, so that if you were to get lost or if you're doing some really big adventure, and Zach, I'm sure you probably have stuff like that from all your through hikes and such, but like that's just a smart thing to have on you, because then if you do hurt your, twist your ankle or break your ankle, whatever, at least somebody can come find you and you won't be stuck out there for days on end. So
totally. And I think that plays into this kind of came about through my interactions with my parents, because they're always like, be careful. I'm like, being careful sucks. You just got to be prepared. Because if you're being careful, it's like real tentative, and that's a whole different set of nerves, and you're probably going to forget to do X, Y, and Z because you're being careful, thinking about all that stuff. But rather just be prepared. So have a GPS, and when you are on your own in a spot where you don't have cell service, like be extra mindful in those areas, and be more aware. So it's really everything you're saying about going in the woods as a runner, as a female runner. It's all about being prepared. It's not like, oh, go and be careful. It's just like, no, this is out there. This is what could happen. Prepare yourself for that possibly. And that's empowering. Is to be prepared is to be empowered. So,
yeah. Right. So you've obviously been running for, a long time. Have you always gone into these long races with just that calm mind, or has there ever been a time where maybe you are running at night or you are running on a trail that, you don't know too well, and your fear's kind of picking up and you're kind of getting scared a little bit? Kind of take us through the mindset that you have, in doing these long distances. I think that'd be pretty interesting to hear about.
Yeah, I totally still get scared at times. And with races, I might try to look relaxed and calm when I'm out there. But it's like a duck. It's like a duck in water. My legs, are like, they look calm on the surface. They're just paddling around. Like
it's a hilarious mental image.
I've never heard that one.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. It's like, just chill, relax. It's all okay. But my heart is racing until that gun goes off. Oh, it's awful. And a lot of runners would say, they always think like, why am I doing this? Like the inner monologues, like, why am I doing this? Why am I putting myself through this? What is the point of this? Why And then once the gun goes off and you start running, you feel much better. But that pre-start line is usually tough. And then, a lot of times it depends. I've done lots of running with people, and I've done lots of solo runs. When I do some solo runs on trails that are a bit more remote, like there was a time when I was going to Rocky Mountain National Park. I wasn't going in an entrance of the park that was, very popular. And I know this one day I was going out and I had to at least, I don't know, it was about like a 10 mile out. So it was a 20-mile day. And I got out there about 7 miles, and it just kind of is pretty grown in, and the things in the back of my, I start thinking like, are there cats out here? There's probably mountain lions out here, like I'm sure they're watching me right now, because you just feel like you're kind of thick in the brush. I haven't seen anybody for, a good 2 hours, so you're just like, oh man. you get a little freaked out, but you just stop, take a few deep breaths, relax, like nothing wants to, like no animal wants to bother you. Like they don't care. They want to be left alone. They're doing their thing. So, when you do start to get freaked out, just like slow down, breathe, take a few, like just walk for, 10 minutes until you feel more comfortable, and then maybe pick up your pace again and go run. But,
once again,
that's what I think.
Once again, such an awesome transfer to the real world.
Right.
What you're saying. And that's been one of the messages that I've tried to get across, is that running an adventure and all of what has seemed like wasted time to some people on the outside, because for me it's more hobby, right? It's like, I'm going for a thru hike, it takes months, or I'm gonna go run, and it's not like I'm getting paid to run. It's like, this and that, but it's really what you get out of it that is transferred into the real world, which is knowing how to calm yourself down in those moments of, for lack of a better word, turmoil or chaos, or being scared, and knowing how to relax, take a deep breath, and go on and continue doing something that's really hard, and make it through just fine. So running.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's true though. It's funny sometimes, and this is another like life situation thing, but like when you're having a rough day or things aren't going right and you need to think or you want to vent, the best place to go to like have a conversation with somebody if you're not getting along, whatever, or you just need to like clear your mind, is like go outside and get fresh air. It's been proven that like literally inhaling lots of fresh oxygen helps you just have more clarity. And so, that's what's one of the cool things about just running outside, it just, I don't know, I've had some of my best conversations with people while on the trail and doing my thing.
All right, everybody, this is definitely one of those moments where you're thankful for what you do have and don't worry about what you don't. We had a fantastic conversation with Gina and lost the last 15 minutes of it, but I think we got an excellent 50 minutes in there. So Gina, thank you so much for telling your story and all the good that you're bringing into the world. Thank you for motivating me and inspiring me to run my first ultra, and all your positive words and inspiration when I did meet you a year ago, and just looking forward to everything that you're going to bring into the world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Gina. You're an inspiration to us and what we're trying to do here at Launch and grow a really amazing community like you have with Trail Sisters. Thank you so much. To all the listeners, we hope you enjoy Gina's story, and we'll see you all at the top.
If you want to be a part of Trail Sisters, don't hesitate to email Gina through Trail Sisters. You can also purchase hats and all kinds of swag on the Trail Sisters website, which is trailsisters.net. And once again, you can find them on social at trail_sisters.
So you tell